Napoleon, from a small island to the throne of an empire asterisk. June 18, 1815, Waterloo, the place where an empire fell and a legend came to an end. Amid swirling gunpowder smoke, fallen horses, and panicked soldiers retreating in chaos. Stands still, alone atop a hill. His cloak soaked in mud, hat pulled low over half his face, his eyes fixed on the horizon, as if watching his own fate slip away. That man was Napoleon Bonaparte, once hailed as the greatest military genius in history, a man who made all of Europe tremble at the mere mention of his name. But how could a boy born on a tiny island off the coast of the Mediterranean, with a strange accent and humble origins, rise alone to claim a throne, crown himself, and rule over an entire continent? And then, how could that same man, great, defiant, calculating, and endlessly ambitious, end his days in solitude on another island, far from the civilized world? This is not just a story of war, not just about legendary battles or lightning coups. This is the story of a man, an era, and a colossal shadow that still haunts history to this day. Let me tell you that journey, or the journey of a Corsican boy, who became Emperor of France and then vanished within the very dream of glory he had built. Before he was Emperor of France, long before the battles that shook all of Europe, Napoleon Bonaparte was just a boy, born in a place the French once called the edge of civilization, the island of Corsica. Corsica, land of mountains. An aspiration Corsican island, rising from the Mediterranean sea wild, beautiful but impoverished. It wasn't just a remote land. It was its own world where people didn't consider themselves French before being annexed by France in 1768. Corsica had belonged to the Republic of Genoa, now Italy, and for a brief moment in history, even declared its own independence. The Corsican people were proud, stubborn, and fiercely independent. It was from this land that Napoleon was born, on August 15, 1769, just 1 year after France took control of the island. To him, France was never truly home. The Bonaparte family, dreamers in a time of turmoil, his family, the Bonapartes, were of modest Italian descent, part of the local middle class. His father, Carlo Bonaparte, was a lawyer who initially resisted French rule, but eventually submitted in order to protect his family. His mother, Letizia Ramolino, was a woman of iron will. She gave birth to 13 children, but only 8 survived. Napoleon was the 4th. Letizia was never indulgent. She raised her children with strict discipline, frugality, and a deep sense of Corsican pride. From a young age, Napoleon absorbed 2 truths. 1, his homeland had been taken from him. 2, to survive and rise, he had to be stronger than anyone else, a lonely, different child. And even as a boy, Napoleon was ... different, quiet, stern, often seen as distant. He didn't enjoy playing with others, but was endlessly drawn. 2 books in solitude, while the other children played outside. He would bury himself in history books. Military treatises fascinated by names like Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar, the more he read. The more a grand dream began to form, a dream of power, glory, freedom. Studying in France, years of alienation thanks to his father's position, Napoleon received a scholarship to study in France, starting at the age of 9 at the military academy, Brion-le-Château. But France did not welcome him. There, he was mocked for his heavy Corsican accent and awkward French. They called him the island savage, a barbarian in uniform. No friends, no allies. Napoleon became the outsider. His only refuge was in books, maps, and his own dreams. But in that darkness, he began forging himself. He advanced quickly. Focusing intensely on mathematics, artillery, and military strategy, he once wrote, "I am willing to endure loneliness, so long as one day I stand above them." Talent revealed, and the hunger to be recognized gradually, teachers began to notice Napoleon's natural leadership and a tactical mind beyond his years. No one in his class could match him in drills, map exercises, or simulated battles. In 1784, was admitted to the École Militaire in Paris, the Royal. Military academy, becoming the first Corsican ever to graduate as an officer by the age of 16. He was commissioned as a second lieutenant of artillery in the French army. A young Corsican of Italian descent, barely fluent in French, but with a head full of strategy and a heart full of ambition. 1789, a year that shook the world. The French Revolution erupted. King Louis XVI was overthrown. The masses rose. Heads rolled. Blood flowed. Nobles fled the country. All of France descended into chaos. But amid that storm, one name began to flicker into the light: Napoleon Bonaparte, a young artillery officer from Corsica. Joining the revolution, I did not choose the king. While many aristocratic officers abandoned the army to defend the monarchy, Napoleon, a societal outsider in France, chose to stand with the revolution. He admired Robespierre, a radical Jacobin leader, and believed revolution is the only path for someone without a title like me to change their destiny. But this was no easy choice. The revolution was not just an ideal, it was a blood-soaked vortex. Executions, purges, betrayals. Even at a young age, Napoleon understood one truth: to survive in this era, you cannot stay neutral. Toulon, the first sparking 1793 revolutionary forces, were in crisis. The port city of Toulon, a strategic stronghold in the south, had fallen into the hands of royalists and the British. Amid the confusion, a young artillery captain was summoned. Napoleon immediately overhauled the attack plan. He repositioned artillery to target key supply lines and strongholds. After weeks of siege, the British were forced to retreat. Toulon was recaptured. Napoleon was promptly promoted to Brigadier General, just 24 years old. It was the first time the name Bonaparte was spoken in Paris. With a mix of admiration and caution, Josephine, a great love in a time of war. As his fame grew, Napoleon met a woman 6 years his senior, Josephine de Beauharnais, beautiful, sharp-witted noble widow who had once been imprisoned. During the Reign of Terror, they came together quickly, passionately. Despite the age gap and her past, Napoleon was enamored. He called her his goddess of fortune, the only person who could make him feel weak. But the love was not simple. Josephine had affairs while Napoleon was away at war, and even though he knew, Napoleon clung to the relationship perhaps as his only anchor in a world spiraling into chaos. A sharp political mind, Napoleon was not just a soldier, he was also a master of political survival. After Robespierre was executed, many Jacobin allies followed him to the scaffold. Napoleon, once a supporter of the radical left, realized he had to change roles quickly to survive. He kept silent, faded into the background, and waited. A whiff of grape shot, Napoleon's defining day, then came Vendemiaire. October 5th, 1795, royalist forces marched on the revolutionary government in Paris. The leaders panicked and called for Napoleon. Within hours, he had artillery positioned at key intersections across the city. As the insurgents advanced, he gave the order: open fire on the crowd. This brutal response would later be remembered as the whiff of grape shot, the blast that silenced a city. The result: the revolt was crushed in a single day. Napoleon was immediately appointed commander of the Army of the Interior and became France's newest national hero, commander of the Italian army, stepping onto the grand stage not long after he was appointed commander of the French army. In Italy, a front long dismissed as secondary. But under Napoleon's command, Italy would become a launchpad for history. He mounted his horse and led a ragtag army across the perilous Alps, carrying not just weapons and maps, but an ambition to shape the fate of Europe. Epic music swells. Scene shifts. Napoleon leads his troops over snowy mountains. A map of Italy appears, names like Milan, Mantua, Arcoa light up, ... closing parenthesis. And in that far-off land, a series of lightning victories would force France and all of Europe to speak the name Bonaparte with awe. And fear. Napoleon was no longer just a young general. He was becoming a political force, a symbol. And a shadow so vast, even the French Republic itself began to feel uneasy. 1796, France was at a crossroads. The fronts were in disarray. The treasury was empty. Morale in the army was dangerously low. And at that moment, 26-year-old general was appointed commander-in-chief of the Army of Italy to the politicians. In Paris, it seemed like a safe move. The Italian front was secondary, and Napoleon could be easily controlled. But they had no idea that this would be the greatest mistake they would ever make. Napoleon did not come to fight battles. He came to make history. The Italian campaign, a symphony of speed and will, Napoleon inherited a broken army, starving, undersupplied, and deeply demoralized. But he didn't scold them. He inspired them. He told his men, "You are starving, half naked. But before you lies the Po, valley rich in grain, honor, and victory." And they believed him. They called him the commander who looked each soldier in the eye. Strategically, Napoleon didn't follow the rules. He marched at lightning speed, split his forces, launched surprise attacks, and always stayed one step ahead of the enemy. Within mere months, he crushed 5 Austrian armies, capturing major cities like Milan, Verona, Mantua, for the first time. A poor and fractured France glimpsed the light of victory from a distant front. The decisive battle, Austria humbled. Europe stunned by the end of 1797, Napoleon reached the Austrian border. At Rivoli, he faced an enemy twice his size, through tactical division and concentrated firepower. He shattered the opposing force within 24 hours. Austria was forced to sign the Treaty of Campo Formio, withdrawing from Italy and recognizing French dominance. Napoleon returned to Paris. A hero without a crown, crowds cheered. The press exalted him, and the ruling elite began to fear him, because a general that powerful was also a political threat. The Egyptian campaign striking at Britain's heart-fearing Napoleon's growing popularity, the French government sought to send him away, out of sight. Out of power, Napoleon agreed, not because he was forced, but because he wanted more than victory. He wanted immortality, stand beside the great generals of antiquity. His target, Egypt, the cradle of civilization, and a key node in Britain's trade route to India. In 1798, Napoleon led 40,000 troops across the Mediterranean, but he didn't bring just soldiers. He brought scientists, engineers, archaeologists, artists, transforming the campaign into a cultural expedition, not just a military one. He said, "We are not here just to fight. We are here to bring enlightenment to the land of the pharaohs." The Battle of the Pyramids, a fleeting glory outside Cairo. Napoleon faced 60,000 Mamluk warriors, fierce, skilled cavalrymen wielding curved blades. The French formed hollow square formations, each side guarded by artillery. As the Mamluks charged like a tidal wave, Napoleon roared. From the tops of those pyramids, 40 centuries are looking down upon you. The result, a stunning French victory. Cairo fell. Egypt was now in Napoleon's hands. But that glory was brief. At sea, the British Royal Navy, under Admiral Nelson, launched a surprise attack at Aboukir Bay and destroyed the entire French fleet. Napoleon was stranded in Egypt, cut off from France. Victory on land could not conceal defeat at sea, returning to France in a golden opportunity. Yet still, fortune favored him. Back in France, the government was collapsing. Famine, rebellion, financial ruin. The people had grown tired of politicians and remembered the name Bonaparte in 1799. Napoleon secretly left Egypt and sailed back to France, even though some viewed his return as desertion. But once he stepped ashore, France seemed to awaken. Crowds welcomed him like a chosen savior, and he no longer just the young general, now carried a bolder vision in his mind. Overthrow the government, seize absolute power, transform France into an empire.